What do you get when a London-raised American South African and a New York-raised Moroccan
meet on the interwebs and become instant soul sisters? One of them, an Ayurvedic practitioner and transformation coach, and the other, a Conspire breathwork coach and Reiki master teacher. Both obsessed with wellness, family, entrepreneurship, relationships, and the magic of human expansion and growth. You get a whole convo.
We truly believe that with an open heart, focused mind, and energy receptive to the possibilities, your wellness journey can guide you to a life that exceeds your wildest dreams.
Welcome to our podcast. We're Ella and Iman, and we are so happy you're here. Come vibe with us as we explore the wholeness of being through the lens of wellness.
Welcome to a whole convo with Ella and Iman, where we're getting into cyclical living, girl.
Ooh, the cycles of self. Yes.
Whew. Let's take a moment. You've said a lot there.
It's all cycles, girl.
For real. Where do we begin this? Because I'm going to leave it to you, Iman. I'm getting carried away.
You're getting so excited about this, I can tell. Let's start off. First of all, I would love to dive in to the different cyclical living ways. Obviously, the cycles of nature is one of them. So I'd love to kind of just touch on a little bit with nature's rhythms and seasonal living and living in cycles with nature. I would also love to kind of touch on menstrual cycle for me personally, who's still on her, menses and has a menstrual cycle every month. It is something that is very real for me. And the past 3 to 5 years, I would say, it's become more prominent in my life to actually align with that cycle as well. Where before it was like either an interruption or like an agony or a burden, where now I'm like, how do I honor that cycle and actually shift my entire schedule around that, or at least specifically the first 3 days? So I'll dive in deeper into that, but that's something that is really big for me. So I'd love to touch on that. And then cyclical living in the sense of daily energy rhythms, right? Like what our day is unfolding, like what we want to curate for the day and kind of the cycles of the day. And then last but definitely not least, and I think both of our favorites, and why I called it the cycle of self too, is just our personal phases, our cycles, and our own personal life and just personal growth phases. So I kind of want to touch on all those 4 layers, and then we can take it from there and dive into some things that you want to go into as well, Ella. But I think it's important, and I think cyclical living matters for sure, because our life is not a straight line.
100%. And on that point particularly, as we get deeper into all of those cycles you mentioned, I'm going to put this out here. I had to take a moment. I had to take a pause. I had to take a breath.
Ooh, I feel it. I feel the heaviness in that.
Because the cycle that is most commonly perpetuated revolves around 2 specific things. That is being ready and available for an 8-hour working day and a circadian rhythm. And the reason I'm putting those things out and had a sigh when I said that is because those 2 ideas come from a very specific male-centric space.
Yes, yes, and yes, and a very industrious.
We've got to be available to output. If we have any resistance to looking at other cycles, let's bear in mind the ones that we had reinforced over and over again have an agenda attached to them.
That's a big point. I love that you brought that up. I think, and it's unfortunate that a lot of us and many people do have to conform to that specific cycle, right? Because the way our society is built and the way most things work, in order to create an income and to create security and to actually have shelter, requires that kind of cycle from one's life. is the clock in, like you said, have an output, put in the hours, put in the work, you get paid, and then that cycle continues. And the balance, or how you like to call it, the harmony, or the, contrasting points of like how much rest you're getting, how many hours of sleep you're getting, how much you're working, are often all over the place with that kind of cycle and model.
100%. So if you are a person who has to conform to those cycles, this is an invitation to look at it from another perspective and ways that you perhaps can introduce some of this awareness, some of this wisdom from broadening your perspective on cycles to help introduce more harmony, to help you feel more connected to yourself.
Yes, exactly. Because we're all about, inviting and introducing and being curious about the ways in which we can actually advance and expand and increase our quality of life versus looking at something, demonizing it, saying this sucks, this doesn't work, which is also valid. I think it sucks. I think that cycle and model does suck, but there are realities of certain circumstances in which you can't just change that overnight. You can't just say, well, that's
Absolutely.
it because it sucks, because it's not conducive for me and my health. I'm going to quit tomorrow and then you're out on the street. This is about how can we actually create longevity and a plan that is sustainable and healthy and in alignment and safe for us ourselves to actually go towards a cycle that eventually will align with our
Exactly.
most authentic and most healthy vital self.
Exactly. Soften the edges within the constraints.
Ooh, I like that. Exactly. Love that. And of course, our favorite thing to do about that is practices and modalities and rituals and activities and exercises that we can bring into our life, no matter what cycle we're in, no matter what our schedule and structure is, that we choose to bring in that actually is practical and realistic and that can soften those edges that Ella's talking about.
100%. So let's dive in to the first cycle you mentioned in that beautiful
Yeah, let's
list.
dive into the seasonal. So the
Yes.
seasonal rhythms, I think, are, especially from a holistic aspect, of course, right? They're so important and they're so real and they're so
Mm.
valid and very supportive. I have found, not only as an Ayurvedic practitioner and Ayurvedic student, myself, and someone who has, taken a lot of knowledge and wisdom from that kind of way of life where you're following the rhythms of nature into a practical way in your life. I found that to be really, really supportive, not only mentally, emotionally, and of course physically. So really quickly, obviously, depending on where you live, where you are in the world, how many seasons, that you actually experience, depending on your climate and the country and geographics of where you live, following that nature, following that rhythm in order for your body to actually align with that. So simple things like rising with the sun and winding down with the sunset.
Mm.
Those two simple things, they seem regular or so mundane, but just those two things, I think, alone have supported me so much in the past few years. And I will tell you, even my farm experience has shown me how much on a cellular level it changes us too. To be able to wake up when the sun rises, and when you're out in nature and in the quiet, you actually hear what's going on. Like you hear more of what's happening, and it is in such alignment with how our body is ready to move forward and to do the things it wants to do. And so, for example, if you did sleep 6 hours or 7 hours or 8 hours, right, and you are waking up with the sun, your body naturally wants to start moving. So depending on where you are, like for example, for me, anywhere between 4:30 and let's say 6 a.m., right? It's the sunrise time, and naturally my
During the summer.
yeah,
During the summer.
during the summer, yes, for sure. right now we're in August here. Thank you for addressing that. For the summertime, that's around the time my body naturally wants to start moving. And so for me, that 6 a.m. time is like so juicy for walking. It just naturally wants to do it. It just my body
Mm.
naturally wants to do it. And then that right there, that action or that choice to do that leads into what the body and the alignment of nature wants to do next. And so to start doing something, start creating or start working or start doing what you need to do for the day just feels more supported coming from that place of movement, coming from that place of you rising with the sun. So it's kind of like a compound effect. And I think that's why nature's rhythms are so supportive because they all just like they add on to one another, like the actions add on to one another. And so when you are ready for, certain kind of, I say decompression or winding down in alignment with the sunset, it makes sense that your body would want to rest because even our melatonin levels on a cellular, just scientific function, they're naturally start to produce when the sun sets and there's no light. But of course, talking about industry and cycles that we started this conversation with, we'll have our lights on, especially if they're really bright or, certain things that they don't support us so much, but then we can actually, if we do have a choice and we're at home and we don't have a night shift or we're not working late, if we can have that choice to start doing those things to align with nature's rhythms, it literally changes ourselves.
100%. And you when you're talking about being on the farm, I thought it must have been so interesting because you went there as the days were getting longer into the summer solstice and then coming back down. So that must have been such an interesting time to be in that quiet, be with the sun, feel the power of the elongation of a day.
Yes, absolutely. Even the energy shifts. And I think that's why when we're just more connected, because that's the thing too. You don't have to be on a farm to really experience that. I just brought that up to say like how validating it is
Mm.
to see it in that way, that it is actually very healthy for ourselves to align with nature's rhythms. It just kind of just magnified it, if you will, like under, a magnifying glass. But we can create that home. I'm in New York City right now. In this moment, I'm in New York City. And so opening up the curtains and the shades, like early in the morning to let that sun in, it's summertime and that sun is coming through the windows as I speak, and it just does something to your soul. It does something to you on a cellular level. So yeah, I am all about that. And you know that I can talk about this for hours, but I'll say just like the practicality of creating that and cultivating that no matter what your schedule is could be really good. Even researching how you can do it for yourself depending on your schedule. Like, here's my schedule. Given that this is what I do, what can I do to further align with nature? Just that is a powerful question. Powerful question, powerful answer.
It's so true. It's about making it relevant to what you've got going on,
Yes,
because I think we have automatically become so disconnected from something as basic as that. And when you basic is really not the right word, because when you mentioned, oh, it's so, I can't remember the word you used, but implying that it's so simple, it's easy to overlook, and that's part of the power of it. Remembering that it's so simple because it's true, and it's so simple because when we can remember that aspect of our animal nature as human beings, we then nourish ourselves, we support ourselves, and we change what's possible. Even if it doesn't look exactly like I have the freedom to wake up at 4 o'clock because, or wake up at 6 o'clock because, but how can I introduce that and make it relevant to me? One of the things that I used to like to do when my girls were growing up, I was of the opinion that they will do whatever I do, and I'm not held back because I have these girls. And yeah, listen, some of the things I was doing, they were not in love with. Come on, we're going for a walk at 6 a.m. Let's get up.
of course.
And yet, for me, it's so powerful to have that demonstration that this is possible. You can do this for yourself. You can choose to shape your life in a way that replicates this. And then that is a teaching that doesn't really need words. It's that invitation to connect with that aspect of us as human beings. So we're talking about this in the summer. What does this look like in the winter time then? When we're
Yeah.
flipping it 180?
Winter for me, I honor and I embrace the seasons so fully. I think there's power in hibernation and in solitude and going inward and in even darkness. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
power in darkness and, you know, just and again, not treating rest and solitude and darkness as like laziness or low vibrational or non-energetic. It's like there's power in that winter time. There's power in the seasons changing. There's power in the transition of the leaves, just like us ourselves are changing and evolving. And I think honoring whatever we feel in that moment can even can be that enough. It can be enough. Just honoring what we're going. And again, our winter could be when we choose it to be as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I think sometimes we can over dramatize that whole aspect of only in wintertime should we hibernate. But again, that's why another aspect of the cyclical living that we wanted to discuss is our personal growth phases. And there could be a season in our life where it is a darker time for us. It is more inward. It is more hibernating. It is more, I don't have the energy or capacity or mental bandwidth to be out there, to be sunny, to be talkative, to be, in community. And that's okay as well.
Absolutely. Our personal winters, wherever
Yeah.
they fall. Absolutely. And that's that's why when you said nature is the most obvious thing to align ourselves with, we don't have to think about it. So it's 8 o'clock, it's still really light outside. And that makes it effortless if I feel connected to keep
Exactly.
being in that space.
Yeah, choosing what part of nature do you want to support you in that moment. And I think that's why we're so big on really going so deep with ourselves and connecting with our inner truth and dimming down the noise, right? And listening to our own truth and asking, is this is my truth? Because if right now I feel ignited, I feel sunny, and I feel ready to go and ready to move, then I can look to nature for that support. But because it's in alignment with my truth. But if I don't feel that and I'm forcing it, nature is not about that either.
Absolutely.
It's not about forcing. And that's why nature even has that word. The natural way of being should be the way we be.
Definitely. And I love that. And being okay with the information, the lessons, and still making that choice.
Yes, yes. So, exactly, 100%. Knowing that there's chaos to be had at times too.
When those hurricanes come through.
Exactly. Tsunamis, our tsunamis and tornadoes of our inner spirit. Oh, wow, that is. Now, I want to dive in really quickly to the menstrual cycle because I have found that for me, it has come to a point in my life where I am more conscious and more present and more aware of the language I use and the words I use around my menstrual cycle and my lunar cycle because growing up, so I got my period when I was 12 years old, around the same time my sister got it, my older sister got it, and around the same time my mom got it. And I used to say things like, I wish I was a boy. Why I this is like so grueling. The period cramps and the pain that came with my menstrual cycle since I was a young, tween, before I even, 12, 13. When I was a young teenager, the pain and discomfort that came with my menstrual cycle, it gave me reason to think it's a bad thing,
Well,
right?
it's called the curse, isn't it? In some,
Yes, right? My culture and my mom, it's a celebration, so I never had that experience, but I know what you're speaking of, you know. But I think that now that I am where I am in my life with my education and my awareness and knowledge and just being an Ayurvedic practitioner and being someone who has studied so much, I do know that there is truth in the concept that your menstrual period is not supposed to be painful. It's not the natural way, speaking of like natural rhythms, but there are so many variables and aspects, Ella, to the way our world has evolved, including the way our soil is, to the way our food is, to our supermarkets and what is considered food and what is not considered food.
mm,
So while we didn't have certain things in the house because my parents were generally healthy people and they were pretty strict with their rules in the house, while we didn't have quote unquote soda in the house or a lot of sugar in the house, I had a lot of soda and sugar outside of the house. You go to a birthday party and I'm having my orange
you're
soda.
sneaking it.
Yeah, you're sneaking it. So it's almost like being a kid is connected to having ice cream and candy. And the only reason why I say that is because I think that I am taking responsibility in the way I have curated and cultivated my cells, right? And my function in my body, in which by the time I got my period caused me pain.
Mm,
Because right now where I am, I can navigate the way my period is and the way my cycle is when I'm very conscious and aware of what I'm doing and what I'm
mm-hmm,
eating and
mm,
what I'm taking in. So for
mm,
me personally, I think it's very important so for our listeners out there that still have menses and still have difficult cycles is to actually be so aware of how you want to curate that cycle when it comes. Besides tracking it, besides knowing I prepare for it. I prepare for it like it's a big, beautiful event.
and there's so much information now that gives us empowerment, gives us different choices
Yeah.
about how we work with that cycle. Because even so, going back to the beginning and saying that we are socialized, we are have cultures that focus around two particular male driven experiences and cycles. There are it blows my mind how disconnected this has made us as women
Mm,
from our cycles. The idea that in older civilizations there used to be this idea of a red tent or a space where women would nurture each other, support each other through their bleed. And my experience of my cycle was I had amenorrhea for a large period of time from around the age of 15 to my early 20s. That's a whole conversation in itself. But looking back, I was so disconnected from awareness about what a cycle could be or how it was supposed to feel or how it could feel for me, how to nurture that understanding, how to nurture that awareness, that it didn't even register until I was told you won't be able to conceive naturally because you've got this going on. Now that didn't transpire because from that point I decided to take my power into how to work with that.
mm,
Getting into that. Over the years, the way my cycle now works, it's like clockwork.
yeah.
And the empowerment that comes from that, because it's a physical process, yes. And as a woman, it also is deeply connected to our creative potential. It's deeply connected to how smoothly things are functioning underneath the surface. And if we are not aware of that power that we hold, if we have been shamed because women don't have the space in that industrial focused 24-hour cycle working rhythm to be with what's
Yeah.
going on in our bodies, whatever phase of our cycle we are in. Then we are then shamed about it, we're disconnected from it, we're made to feel that it's less than, or there's something that we, using your words, I wish I was a boy,
Yeah.
because it's so deep in our collective psyche to reject that aspect, because it's almost like, oh, it's getting in the way, this is a problem,
Yes.
why am I like this? And that's if you have a relatively regular cycle, and then
Exactly.
there are
Let
so many
alone the
things,
deeper, yeah.
so many things that can affect our rhythms, that can affect our pain, that can affect how the actual physical process of a menstruation happens over all the phases. And, that is a whole convo in itself. And then how that then transfers as we're going through perimenopause and menopause. And even remembering that even when a woman's cycle ceases, we still tapped into that cyclical aspect of ourselves, because it is in ourselves. It's part of the chemistry that happens even when menses cease.
Fast,
So
yeah.
there's just so much. I guess I'd like to invite anyone who's listening to this, if you have any, particularly talking from the cessation of menstruation, if you have amenorrhea, if you have experiences where that is shut down, to invite you to really support and nourish yourself through understanding and working through that process, because there's so much wisdom that your body is inviting you to tap into by understanding, healing, working through that disconnection or that out of place experience that you're going through.
Yeah, for sure. God, we can go on and so deep because that's the thing too. And my heart goes out to so many women that I even know personally that have gone through so many different, really scary, challenging phases in their life when it comes to their reproductive health and their menses and, having like surgeries and even their uterus removed and so many aspects just to be able to function, just to be
Mm-hmm.
able to live a life without pain. So, of course, it can go to that extreme as well. And while this episode is not about that, and now I'm even,
We will revisit this.
yeah, we have to revisit this. We have to do an episode on just this cycle alone because there's so many things. I know how powerful it is to actually give it that honor, really, because that's actually what I mentioned. Like now, I treat it and prepare for it like it's an event because it is. It's a sacred
Absolutely.
event. I am so privileged, and I say that with a lot of respect and reverence to knowing that not everyone has that flexibility or availability to do so. But for me right now, at this moment, I honor the first 3 days when I can to fully rest. Fully rest, like you said, the red tent. And we learned that too in grad school, like in Ayurveda and in ancient times, in many places all over the world, before the industrial civilization, before all the things, right? That took away from our natural way of being, and why this episode is even important, why we wanted to do it. The natural ways of our cycles. Before that time, it was a sacred time to rest,
Mm,
nurture, and care and honor the body and
absolutely.
let it do what it does. Let it bleed. Very recently I learned about like bleeding into the earth and bleeding into soil and how sacred that is and I'm just more curious about it and I'm definitely excited to do another episode. So we'll leave it at that. I will
Yeah.
we'll close it out with that is a very important cycle and why it's part of the cycles and cyclical living that we wanted to talk about in this episode and how it actually expands us and revitalizes us as beings. But we'll definitely have an episode dedicated to this fully in this season for
Because
sure.
we have so much more to
So
say.
much more to say. Let's jump to the daily cycle and just daily energy rhythms and our 24-hour time frame cycle. That's what we get, right? We only get 24 hours.
That's all you've got. That circadian rhythm, go.
What do you like to do? How do you honor your cycle of the day?
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting one because it depends what's going on in the day. And we talk
Yeah.
about flexibility and how our lives are created at this moment in time. For me, I'm always an early riser. That is very fortuitous as the summer time comes. But this is something that was instilled in me by my dad. He used to wake me up at 5 every morning. It's a thing. And I think South Africans generally tend to wake up earlier because their day starts at 7 o'clock. So their working day starts at 7. So it's a thing. But for me, I feel so much clearer when I give myself the space front loaded. I
Mm,
feel I can get more organized. I can have quiet time before the world starts to catch up and be awake,
yeah.
and to be more intentional about what I want to do for the day. And it's really important for me to have space for my practice because if I get up at 7 o'clock, I do feel a little bit confused. I feel a bit out of sync. I
Yeah.
want to wake up. I want to do my Reiki practice, do my meditation, do my journaling, do my breath work practice, move a little. Maybe I'll go for a walk, depends on the weather. Maybe I'll do it indoors. But that early morning time is dedicated to setting myself up for the day.
Mm. Ditto, 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 and another ditto, girl. And you know what's so funny, Ella? I used to not be that way. In
Really? You weren't a morning person?
No, I was not a morning person well into like my late 20s. Like I always used to feel like a such a burden to wake up early. And I think it's because, when in hindsight now, it makes so much sense because I was a teenager that did a lot of things that authentically I didn't want to do so like I had to go to school at a certain time. When I was an athlete in high school and college, we had to go to practice at a certain time. It always felt like I was forced to do something. Someone told me I needed to do it, right? And work again when I was, working in my 20s. And let's say when I was a personal trainer, I used to, when you start as a new personal trainer, especially in a very big fancy gym like I did, the newbies get the like opening shift. So they get the ones that people don't really want. No one wants to open the gym at 4:30 a.m. and you have to like commute on the train and trek to the location when it's still dark outside. You feel so like at that time it felt so miserable. So I think it's what I was doing and what was happening that again we talk about like like those thought process and that conditioning made it feel like this is not something that's desirable.
Mm.
Then later and over the years, and as I got more into holistic medicine and just more into nature and more into connecting with myself, and again, turning down the noise and really hearing what I wanted and what was my truth, I actually naturally enjoyed and wanted to wake up early for the same reasons you're saying. And that's why now I resonate and I connect with that because now it's about the power of choice.
Mm.
What am I able to do? And a lot of my clients that actually feel the way I used to or have a schedule that limits them from maybe having more time, one of my main encouragements to them is to actually create a schedule for themselves that honors their solo time before they go and give, before they go and do, before they go and, care for their child or mom or whatever, before they do anything to really honor and have that solo time alone in the morning when, even if it means waking up a little bit earlier, even if it's 30 minutes earlier than you usually do, because it really does shape the day. It really does ignite a certain energy that is dedicated to you.
100%. And I underline that. Do you know what? Even if it's 10 minutes earlier, it's that
Seriously.
it's that time where you're not just thrown into responsibility, thrown
Yes.
into attention drawn here, there, and everywhere. And that intentional space of tapping inwards makes a world of difference. I always encourage that as well. And like you say, I think a lot of people have that resentment if they feel like, oh, I've done something for everybody all day and now I'm just going to stay up later so I can have that time. Flip it on its head, get it in that part of the day, and everything changes.
Everything changes. I love that. That's so valid because it you have to flip it on its head and do it the other way around because it kind of feels like leftovers for you at the end. You're depleted and it's like the leftover. And I think that speaks volumes into the way it translates to everything else we do in our life. So if we're constantly putting ourselves last,
At the bottom of the list.
at the bottom of the list after this and after that, and when I do that and when I do this, then it translates into other things we do. And it's very easy for our life to just continually kind of become that cycle. Speaking of like it becomes this cycle where you're just the last person on the list. And that's never vital. That's never healthy. And that's not really honoring ourselves as the sacred being that does need to take care of ourselves first and foremost.
Yeah, and I realized we could be ruffling feathers by putting it so plainly. It's an invitation, guys. It's an invitation.
Yes, yes, exactly. One thing I will add actually is to put in pockets, like put in pockets of times throughout the day that actually honor our health and our vitality. And you mentioned something similar to that. So even if the morning is not waking up 30 minutes earlier and it's 10 minutes earlier, then for the morning, the solo time, even during the day, to have pockets of silence or a 5 minute tea time or a few minutes here and a few minutes there of just kind of coming inward a little bit. I think that has actually like totally changed the way the day goes for me as well, is to pick little pockets of times where I'm like, what's the focus now that I want to take a moment with at this like exact second.
Underlining that and saying, I'll always say our breath, being with our breath, bringing that presence in, connecting, and it also mitigates how quickly the time can just blend into one and we just lose track of the day and lose track of what's actually happened in our experience because we come into that presence with an intentional action, an intentional reconnection. So I love that.
So last but not least, the personal phases cycle.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This one I think is a big one. Because if you think about it, no matter what's going on in nature, no matter if our alignment, kind of supports that or doesn't, or the cycles, that we already spoke about, it always comes back to self. And it always comes back to what's really happening in the context of our own personal lives and how we can actually expand that and support that for ourselves. So do you want to share anything before I say anything more than that?
I love the cycles of self in our development, particularly if we make a conscious decision to embrace them as opposed to being disappointed, feeling frustrated, feeling bitter, feeling angry about certain themes representing themselves to us in our lives. By this, I mean we all have certain themes. We all have certain challenges that are ours to navigate during this lifetime because of who we are, the family we're born into, the way that we have experienced our lives, particularly in our young life. And I loved learning and letting this idea settle that if I experienced a particular theme in a cyclical way presenting itself to me again, it didn't mean I'd failed. It didn't
Right.
mean I hadn't got the lesson. It didn't mean that I hadn't moved forward. It was an invitation to see actually, this is how far you've come since the last time this cycle presented itself to you.
I
And
love that.
that is one of my favorite things about intentional living, about being a person who chooses to develop and evolve in my lifetime, because I can I can be in that familiar place and embrace what it has to offer me without making it mean anything other than, oh, I know this. I this is me learning, going deeper and moving through this.
Yes, I love that and celebrating that, right? Because the thing that I wanted to share about this specific cycle is just, and I think we mentioned this in the beginning of our convo, is that our life is not straight lines, it's not a
Exactly.
linear experience. And so knowing and embracing the fact that we go through evolutions, we go through different phases, and actually allowing ourselves to honor them, I think just gives us our power back, right? So I think when we
Absolutely.
look at ourselves and what phase we're in currently in our life and what we actually desire and what we want to create and what we want to cultivate in our lives, to just be present with who we are right now, be truthful and honest and authentic with what we actually want to do, feel, and want to create, and then take the steps in order to create that, and know that no matter how long it takes or no matter what cycle we're in, this is the present moment and it's the only time we actually have control over. I think this was an important topic to definitely bring up today. So
It
thank
was,
you, darling.
thank you, darling. It was right on time. And watch this space for a deeper dive into some of the cycles that we've brought into this convo.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, everyone, for listening
Thank you.
in.
Until next time.
That is a wrap on this week's convo. We had a blast talking to you.
Thank you for sharing your time, hearts, and minds with us.
We hope this episode left you thinking, feeling, and maybe even breathing a little deeper. If it moved something in you, please share it, text it to a friend, or just sit with it.
Remember, the power of change can start with the simplest convo.
And if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our show so you never miss a moment of the magic. And if you're curious about any of our services and offerings, check out the show notes for all the links and goodies. We're so grateful you're on this journey with us. Until next time,
Stay rooted, stay whole.